Welcome back to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics in the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover, and I'm excited to be joined today by another new legislator, someone new to the state capitol, David Tangipa, Assemblyman representing District 8, which is Calaveras, Fresno, Inyo, Madera, Mariposa, Mono, Tuolumne counties.
Mm-hmm.
Did I get them all?
Did you get Mariposa too?
Mariposa.
And Fresno?
I got Mariposa and Fresno. Yeah. I think we got it, man.
Perfect.
You got a district.
A fun one.
Welcome to the show.
Well, I call it the outdoor district. And I mean, who else other than me and Senator Gill, we get to represent Yosemite. So we've got...
It's pretty exciting.
We've got some beachfront property in Arizona is kind of the way I like to describe my district a little bit too. So got the mountains, the valley, and I mean, again, it's the outdoor district, one of the most beautiful places in the world.
That's great. I just got a new laptop over the weekend, set up my Yosemite background. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like we've got to do a district event in Yosemite and we can have some fun.
Well, hey, thanks for being on the show. I think before we dive in, let's just dive in with this question. I know I usually ask it a little later, but how's it going for you so far? What's it been like for you in the state capitol, and how you been feeling about everything?
Yeah, well, I can tell you this: it's definitely been a whirlwind, and even as I spoke to a few others, coming into this session with a special session with what the state of California wanted to do with the Trump litigation fund. And then, 4 days into January, and pretty much when we get started, we have the largest economic disaster.
Yeah.
But it's something that I'm actually fairly familiar with, because when I started working for Fresno County Board of Supervisors, I started on March 3rd, 2020, March 12th, 2020, the whole COVID issue really came to fruition. And so, calamity somehow likes to follow me a little bit.
COVID, the huge fires. I mean, My
first year at the Board of Supervisors, we had COVID. We had the largest fire in California's history for a brief period until the next year. We had the winter floods. We had everything. And now I come here and we've got the largest fire on this side. And so I've already been barred from running for governor because calamity likes to follow, or president, or anything else. And I've had some people tell me that it must be me. So
you know what? I mean, look, I'm not going to say that, but it's very, I'm not going to say it's not, right? We got to be careful.
Is it always a coincidence? You never know.
Well, hey, tell us a little bit about your background, kind of what brought you to the legislature, what made you decide to run for office, and then also a little bit about your district. So, love to hear more about that.
Well, here's the cool part is you're actually my family's assemblyman.
That's right.
And
North Highlands.
I'm from North Highlands. I was actually born here in Sacramento. My mother immigrated here from the island of Tonga. My dad was in the Navy.
That's awesome.
We've always heard those Navy jokes that that Navy guy is out there and they have a secret family and find an island girl. I'm the punchline to that joke. I am the product of a secret family.
Nice.
And then with growing up with my mother used to do some in-home care as well and took care of my grandmother on my father's side. And so growing up in North Highlands is something that I hold near and dear to me. I spent my entire childhood in this pretty much Sacramento area. And so what really kicked me into politics, too, was what happened to the North Highlands area when I was growing up. They shut down McClellan Air Force Base, and I remember asking my parents, where did all my friends go and why is everything boarded up? And, and I was just told right there that that's what happens when somebody somewhere else who doesn't care about your area makes decisions about your life, and, you're left with whatever happens.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've been obsessed with presidents, policymakers, creating policy, because it's truly where I believe that it can change people's lives for the better or for the worse. It just depends on who's making it. And if you don't care enough to be a part of it, you're just going to have to either suffer the consequences or, generally things could get better or worse. And so had the chance to get out of North Highlands, and most people who are familiar with it, there's only 3 ways you get out. You're either rapping, you're selling drugs, or you're playing sports. And I can tell you this, I'm not much of a rapper. I prefer not to sell drugs. And I was 6'4" and 200 pounds in the 8th grade. So I think sports found me. And so I had the chance. I went to Foothill High School, got out, went to play football at Fresno State. And while I was there, I quickly realized there are two type of players. There are NFL guys and there are education guys. And I had a buddy of mine who's 17 years old, benching 500 pounds, squatting 700 pounds. And I knew right there that I was really good at school. And so I really focused. I got my degrees in political science, criminology. I got my legal studies certificate. My undergrad was pre-law, essentially. And then I got my master's in marketing because I had graduated early. And if Fresno State's going to take my knees, I'm going to take as many degrees as I can from them. And I got my master's in that, where I opened up my real estate business, focusing on the Central Valley. And the main reason why is because I saw that the easiest way to break generational poverty was through home ownership. And so I really helped put a lot of my friends and family growing up in a lot of the low-income neighborhoods, a lot of the Section 8 neighborhoods. I wanted to make sure that I was actively working to pull my family out of poverty and also my friends as well. So I've done over $20 million in sales of just helping my own friends and family in North Highlands and in Fresno. And the main reason why I looked at that was because the price index in LA and the Bay Area was way too expensive, and what Kevin Johnson was doing here and changing Sacramento, that this is going to be the next area that they moved into. And so put my friends and family on a program together, basically told them that if they've got 10 pairs of Jordans, gold chains, diamond necklaces, and everything else, but you rent where you sleep, you're not a baller. And somebody else has that type of control in your life. And so help put them on this program. Then I started working for Fresno County, obviously because I had that passion for policy and being involved again. And then with Jim Patterson terming out and some of the work that we were able to do, we ran for Assembly District 8.
That's amazing.
Now
and now
we're
you're here.
Yeah.
Look at that. That's great. Well, I appreciate that. Well, who were some of the guys you played with? Did you play with anyone any of the listeners would know at Fresno State? Because I know Fresno State's put out some people like quarterbacks and
So I'm the year after Derek Carr and Devontae Adams.
Okay, so you were in which by the way, I went to that bowl game in their final game together in Las Vegas.
Oh, against USC.
Against USC,
we
because we did lose. And, it was a little rough, but it's all good. And my dad went to Fresno State, so I'm a big Bulldogs fan, right? And so I grew
Are
up.
you just telling me this now?
I don't know. Are we just talking about this? So I was born in Fresno. Grew up going to Fresno State football when David Carr was the quarterback, my dad was an alum, and so I grew up rooting for the Bulldogs, until my family moved to the Sacramento region. I almost did the reverse of you.
No, that's what I was going to say. It was like, you're representing my hometown.
I spent the childhood years in Fresno and then moved to the Sacramento area, but always loved rooting for the Bulldogs. Loved it whenever they could play USC and take on the big dog, right? Got to see their last game. So you came in the year after that.
The year after that.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay.
So my first year, and the actual first game I was a redshirt freshman, so I didn't play, was against USC.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's so funny. That's quite a game.
But I got a lot of buddies that play in the NFL.
That's awesome.
Ronnie Rivers, Jake Hainer.
Ronnie Rivers. Yeah, Jake Hainer.
He plays for the Saints
right?
now.
Yeah.
He and we didn't play together. He came the year after me.
Okay.
But I also used to do the radio for Fresno State.
Nice.
Post-game radio analysis. And so,
I love it. That's great.
Had to give it up just because of the equal time clause.
There you go. Yeah,
but I'm hopeful I can get back on soon.
That's awesome. Well, hey, appreciate you coming on the show. I already asked about how it's going so far. I guess the final question's like, what are some of the things you're working on this year? And what are some of your hobbies or interests? What are some things you like to do for fun?
Yeah. Well, for me, growing up in North Highlands and then living pretty much my entire adult life so far in the Fresno area, I think I have a good, my area is very, very conservative that I represent. The area I grew up in wasn't conservative at all. I think it really gives me this dynamic and understanding that, California is a very unique place. I mean, we have more population in this state than the entire country of Canada. And, at times feel like we paint with a broad brush when it comes to policy. What works for the city and population areas doesn't work for a lot of the rural and the county areas.
Yeah.
And, for me, I've taken this approach, and it's a policy that I have in my office, is that I do believe that the liberal ideology actually identifies a lot of problems that people feel, and I believe that the conservative ideology adds the actual policy making and execution behind it. So our policy in our office is let's find liberal problems and add conservative solutions.
Nice.
And so I think we've developed a pretty good bill package that really focuses on rural health care, because we know that that's important. I even have a student loan debt bill.
Good.
That focuses on giving businesses an incentive to help pay off student loan debt as additional option for them to write off on their books. But it also helps the students really, if they're going to work at a restaurant.
Yeah.
This restaurant now has a new tax write-off that they can help pay their student loan debt.
That's awesome.
While they're working on it.
And that's huge. And I think that's super important for students, obviously. But something's got to give on this higher education thing, because the cost of higher education is so incredibly, I would say unattainable for a lot of families. We always used to say, and I don't believe that college is the only way to success, right? There are a lot of different ways, a lot of different career paths. But for the people that, that is their strength and they want to go to college and that's how they're going to find their success, it's becoming so difficult. People are getting priced out, and something's got to give on this, because we can't be loading up our grandkids and our kids with all this debt.
100%. And higher education is what changed my life. I'm the first person to graduate from college. I started my business there because of what I learned at Fresno State. I sponsored my mother's education, or my mother's citizenship, because of a lawyer that really helped me get her paperwork in order. It helped, completely changed my life, and it also helped save my family's life. So I have a deep appreciation for what higher education can do. But what we've done now is created this college industrial complex. Especially, it is the only loan, and it doesn't make any sense at all, that an 18-year-old can walk in and it's an unlimited amount that they can really pull from. Yeah. And with 100% federally backed loans to the institutions, there's no loss. Yeah. There's no risk. These institutions actually have a pretty much incentive.
Interesting. Yeah.
An incentive to completely put these students in debt, because they're going to be 100% funded by the federal government, and they are allowed to move that number and raise it to whichever point that they see fitting.
Well, and there's certainly no incentive to cut costs. That's for sure, right? There's nothing in the status quo that really encourages universities and colleges to, run more efficiently, right? Or reduce prices for their students.
And it's the only debt that you cannot file bankruptcy on.
Yeah,
is the debt that we are putting a bunch of 18-year-olds on. Yeah.
And by the way, when you're 18, a mountain of debt doesn't look as daunting, right? Because you think, oh, I got my whole life to pay it off.
Exactly.
Right?
Especially
you're just not really in a position where it's a bad combination.
Yeah. And they're told that they're going to have this high-paying job after, and the world has shifted. Yeah. And it's actually a piece that I've been writing about called, it's a difference in higher education now. There are experience schools and there are education schools that unless you go to an Ivy League where you have that, you're really going for an education at those. All the other schools, especially with this day and age and the Gen Z population and the millennial population, most of them are going to experience schools. And that's where you see this bump in Southern schools, Texas schools, the SEC belt that I kind of call it, where they're getting this huge inflow of students, and they're not going to Alabama for the Alabama education. They're really going for the experience that they're getting from there. And that's been a different shift that we've seen in higher education now.
Interesting. Last question. You do anything for fun? I'll tell you what I did for fun, by the way, over the weekend. So I went and saw the Minecraft movie. I don't know if you've heard about this yet, but I know you don't have kids, but if you had kids, or if you just were really into Minecraft, this is the crazy thing about this movie. I could almost not even hear the movie because there was applause like the entire movie. Every single scene, the entire, I guess it was opening weekend, and my 11-year-old totally knew what was going on. I had no idea what was going on. And my wife and I were looking at each other like, what are we doing? Like, what is happening? And because there's this combination of young kids that are really into Minecraft like mine, like my son, and then like people that have been playing Minecraft since they were little and waiting for this movie for like over a decade. And they were all in that auditorium. It was hilarious, man. Anyway.
I love it. My nieces and nephews are huge into Minecraft. I think one of the funniest jokes that I've been able to see is like, back in the 1920s and 30s, they used to have child labor and the kids were in the mines, and now they're doing Minecraft, and the statement from it is that the kids still yearn for the mines.
That's pretty funny.
So, yeah.
That's pretty funny stuff right there. That's great. Yeah. So, but yeah, what about you? What's going on? Do you ever have free time? I think is the question here.
Because I'm not married and I don't have kids, my team is sending me everywhere and anywhere.
There
and
you go.
I do appreciate them for it, because I'm trying to do as much as I can while I can.
Yeah.
Because I hopefully do plan to get married.
Of course.
And I also want like a lot of kids.
All right.
So
Well, that's
I come from a big family. And
That's awesome.
if I can have 6 to 9, I'd love to have 6 to 9 kids.
Well, I can assure you that you cannot have 6 to 9, but
Yeah, no, exactly. I don't know. We're in California. Remember that.
yeah, so that's awesome though. I would definitely highly recommend kids. I cannot support or oppose 6 to 9 because I can't speak to that personally. But I will tell you 3 is a lot, and so that's been our experience. But my wife and I both come from very small families, so for us it's a lot. But
my mom's one of 16.
That's amazing. Yeah.
I'm one of 5, pretty much.
That's wild. Yeah.
And I'm the middle, so
That's cool.
But I've always taken care of. I helped my parents got sick for a little bit when we were younger, and so I took care of my younger brothers. And
That's awesome.
We were really focused on that. So I love having more kids. And
that's what's great about family. Like my kids passed a threshold recently, so I've got 2 teenagers now, and then my 11-year-old's kind of still catching up, right? And they, everyone used to kind of fight, but then they passed this threshold recently where they're like, yeah, we get along now. We're like on the same team now. And I'm like, what is happening? So now they're teaming up against us, right? So I'm just like, shoot, things are changing quick here in teenager land, right?
Yep. But I love
that's
that.
awesome.
I will say the one thing that I actually really do, I love to do for fun, is actually I love to dance.
Oh, cool.
And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, I used to do some like East Coast ballroom swing and
very cool.
Stoney's, the little country
Yeah,
bar
I've
over here.
I've been there a couple times.
Yeah.
That's not my scene, but I definitely have popped in a couple.
Yeah,
times.
the dance instructor there, her name's Kim, and
That's awesome.
she's a good friend of mine too.
I love
and
it.
So
Okay.
yeah, whenever I can find time, I will.
Good stuff. Well, hey, let's send this clip to all the single ladies out there, and then they can hear you saying you love to dance. I'm sure that'll help get you along the road to hopefully eventual marriage. We'll see. Hey, but thanks for coming on. We're gonna dive into the stories of the week. So this one, I guess it's been a week now or so, but I had to get your take on it because I know you had some opinions. But the Democrats, the Assembly Democratic Caucus, decided we're not going to use X anymore. We're leaving Twitter. We're going to, just remove our state accounts or not use our state accounts, I guess. And what were your kind of thoughts on that?
I thought it was interesting, some of the comments that were shared by some of the other elected leaders in this state on how, transparency and, wanting. And it's just funny to me that now, as we've seen in social media, they're just now entering into their own political echo chamber, and that reinforcement of ideas. It's actually something that I love to do. Is I like to join other groups, and I listen actually to a lot of Democrat or liberal, different types of podcasts that don't have the same opinion.
Understanding the perspective, absolutely.
Because that's the way it's supposed to be. And I think compromise is the most beautiful thing about our government, but we haven't had compromise in California for a long time. And so now we're seeing these echo chambers. I think the issue that's happening right now where they're actually leaving is because the failures that we had really pointed out by elected leaders on ours before. Kevin Kiley would talk about it a lot. Vince would talk about it a lot. Those members were calling out these issues that were now starting to materialize, that they're having to own the failures. And what they don't like to see is the actual criticism and holding a standard. And yet that's being, even the governor said that his own party is toxic. And I don't remember Gavin Newsom being the bastion of right-wing conservatism. And so if he's the one who's claiming that it's toxic, this type of agenda where you're just silencing the other community that you don't even want to listen to, I think it just points it out and highlights it even more.
I don't know if you saw, speaking of X, there was a tweet. I don't even have it in the list here, but it was Sam Liccardo former mayor of San Jose and the current congressman out there, was totally trolling Newsom on the toxic comment, right? The Democrat ban being toxic. And he said something along the lines of like, it's like the child that killed his parents crying orphan, like, at the hearing, basically. It's just, I don't have the tweet in front of me, but it was just like pot calling the kettle black, man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, part of the reason the brand is toxic is because of Gavin Newsom. And so, it was an interesting kind of inter-party disagreement.
I think it's a circular firing squad.
Yeah,
You've got Gaslight Gavin calling out his own party because he's gaslighting them, and yet they're turning back around, and then there's
a lot of friendly fire going back and forth right now.
Well, and they're displaying their own toxicity right there.
It is.
You've got the gaslighter, and then the other toxic, and now you get two toxic relationships yelling at each other.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch. I will say my comments on this whole X thing. I find it a little bit amusing. I'll be honest with you. I think I don't take it completely seriously. I think people will eventually come back. It also, by the way, didn't even include their personal accounts. It's just their state accounts. So, I don't really know what kind of message this is really even going to send. But I don't think it makes any sense to leave the conversation, right? And it was funny because when Newsom on his podcast had Charlie Kirk on a few weeks ago, Charlie Kirk even kind of criticized him for this, that the left doesn't put itself in situations where they have to be challenged and they have to actually test their arguments, because so much of, honestly, college and kind of, the educational process of growing up is pretty left-leaning. And so you really aren't conservatives. They're always in a position where they're kind of in the minority, especially at universities, right? So being a part of a group of people that is has different opinions than you, that's normal, right? And we actually don't mind that. It doesn't bother us. But the left doesn't really get that in quite the same way. They don't get that same experience. So it's kind of interesting to see this because, what was it, like 3 years ago, they did polling on the political makeup of Twitter, and about 70% was left-leaning, about 30% was right-leaning. The latest polling data shows that, yes, Twitter has moved to the right. What does that mean? It means now it's about 50-50. And literally, I think it's 48% left, 47% right at this point. So you're telling me that you're leaving a platform where 50% of the people agree with you and 50% don't, and you can't handle that sort of engagement. It's just kind of shocking to me. It really does not demonstrate strength, in my opinion. And my prediction is that some of the people will stay on their personal accounts or eventually come back after they get the news cycle, of this story.
Well, it's just hilarious to me that, there are individuals out there that talk about, right-wing conspiracies or suppressing democracy. And then I sit here as one of the fastest members ever to be kicked off of committees.
That's right.
Because I didn't even get a chance to be there first.
You didn't even sit on a committee, right?
Didn't even sit on one, and yet I was removed. And I said this out there. I said that if this was happening in Washington the same way that the minority party is being treated here, the Democrats would claim that it's a dismantling of democracy. And yet they can't even listen to that own ideology and even treat the minority party with the same respect that they have, because they represent 500,000 and I represent 500,000.
That's true.
About. And
100%.
So I believe that we do deserve, but
there was a couple pieces on that, right? Criticizing the Democrats for that move.
But I think you get that move, then you get leaving Twitter or X, and then you get all this. Then you get the governor's call out. That whole circular firing squad's all going to come to fruition fairly a whole lot sooner than not.
It's an interesting move. I don't think it's the right one, but they're free to do whatever they want. If they want to go hang out on Blue Sky or Threads where nobody is, that's fine. That's fine. So we'll see. New bill. I actually was part of this bipartisan group. We introduced a housing package a week ago now, I guess. 22 bill package on streamlining permit reform, making housing not just more affordable for consumers, but more affordable to build in California. Really, so much of the cost of housing is materials, but it's also timing. It's also CEQA. it's also all the regulations that we've put that have made California such a difficult place to build. And so my legislation is kind of a more smaller bill in that package, but I think the headline piece of legislation would extend CEQA reform and CEQA exemptions to infill multifamily housing. Obviously not the only type of housing we need, right? I'm a big believer that we need all types of housing in California. We need multifamily, we need single family. But this would definitely allow, large cities, urban areas like San Francisco, LA, to do more infill in a much more efficient way. And so really excited about that. I didn't know if you had seen that or had any thoughts on it or the housing situation in general.
No, I love a lot of the work that you've been able to do to get that. I know this is something that a lot of people have been talking about for a while, saying that it needed to be changed and reformed because my industry is real estate. I have my own real estate investing side as well. I've worked with a lot of huge builders and developers that all want to be here in California, but they just can't do it because the margins are so small. It's so hard to be here. You get these random pieces that are just all of a sudden changed. And so, no, I love a lot of the work that you're doing. And look, this CEQA portion of it should be changed. And it was Governor Ronald Reagan who helped pass CEQA. And we should see that these forms and changes that we can work together to just get out of our own way. Yeah. And I think that it's been weaponized and used, and it was never intended to be a project killer. That I think we see all of these cost of government and the cost of working in California. It's just not working. So I'm excited to see that.
No, I am too. And it's actually really funny that you say that. And I feel like I'm not trying to promote other podcasts on the show, but Newsom had Ezra Klein on his podcast last week. And Ezra was pretty critical of, really a lot of things on the left. But he is obviously a left-leaning, actually very left-leaning person. But feels like, Democrats are not actually getting things done, which I would wholeheartedly agree with. And CEQA was a big reason why, right? But it was interesting the way they broke down the CEQA argument because, yes, Ronald Reagan did sign CEQA into law, but it wasn't until after that the courts actually interpreted it in a much broader context that opened up the floodgates for all of these lawsuits. And I think you're right. That was never the intention of CEQA, but that was the result of CEQA. So as policymakers, we need to actually do something to fix it. Unfortunately, it's become this third rail for a lot of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And I'm really excited to see bills like this authored by Democrats that are saying, hey, we need to fix this. This can no longer be a third rail. We need to actually take some action here. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and there was data that was shared that you see all of the expansions, all of the building, and we're on track right now by 2030 to lose 4 more congressional seats after we've already lost for the first time in California history from the census. And then all the other states that have these burdensome regulations, they're all losing seats. They're moving to Florida and they're moving to Texas, and there's a reason why, and it's because of policy. And I think when people finally start to wake up, you can't blame everything on everybody else, and you can look internally and have some accountability. Now we can actually see the changes, and so I just want to make sure that to you, I'm saying thank you, because we don't have a housing crisis or housing affordability crisis. We have a housing availability crisis because
that's a good way to put it.
Because of burdensome regulations like this that don't allow people to build. If you've got more people coming, then we need to just build more housing.
Well, hey, speaking of that's a great transition because speaking of burdensome regulations, there was a new study that came out by a professor at USC that talked about our gas prices in California, right? And this needs to be categorized in the we knew that already category, I guess, because most of it is just very common sense. But he talks about in the study how the state's perpetually high gas prices are largely self-inflicted. They are a result of, to your point, policy, not of price gouging, as the governor has continued to claim. In fact, the landmark, and I'll put it in air quotes, the landmark price gouging bill that this legislature passed to this day has not taken a single action against any refinery because they have found no evidence of price gouging. So this own landmark legislation that was supposed to fix price gouging and call it out hasn't been able to find any. This study reiterates that. It's not price gouging. It's actually, how does he put it? The result of directed policies and a litany of regulations, taxes, fees, and costs. So, your comments on that, I mean, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here.
I mean, that's... I feel for any business that just tries to operate in California. I mean, we talk about it on the building side. We talk about it on now for refineries, and that I think they even put out a study that showed that the number one take home of that industry that sells gas here in the state of California is actually the California government.
Huh.
And that they make per gallon $1.40 per gallon.
Yeah.
And the take home per gallon that the oil industry actually makes is in between 9 cents and 44 cents.
Incredible.
And so that means California,
the biggest beneficiary,
the state government, is the one actually taking the most money. So I think the price gouging needs to be found in Sacramento. And we can see that through a lot of the bills that are now proposed, where they're trying to reform the gas tax to that road mileage tax, which tells me even when people are saving money, this state wants to prioritize taking it away, finding another way to take this money because we don't have enough money to pay for all these road projects. No, we do. We actually do have enough money. We just don't spend it properly. When it's going towards CEQA, when it's going towards more regulation, when we have to pay people to operate in our own government because we can't get through all the minutia. And that this government is really just showing itself by saying, okay, we're not making enough on the gas tax because we have too many electric vehicles out there, which is hypocrisy in my, what I think, that now they want to move to that roads mileage side of things, mainly because they need to find another way to take hard earners working to get their own money. They need to find a different way to take it from them.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting to your point where you're heavily relying on something as a source of tax revenue that you're at the same time passing policies to get rid of, essentially to choke out. And, the thing is in California, we have our government with its regulation and policy has choked the supply. We've forced refineries to close. We might lose more this year. It's still to be determined.
Phillips 66.
It's a huge concern. But demand hasn't changed, right? And so, this is all government created. It's a government created crisis at this point. I was just in Arizona, paid like $3 a gallon or something, $3 something a gallon. It was wonderful. And it just begs the question. It's like, wow, why are they only price gouging in California? They're not price gouging other places, except for the places where government policy has really forced, supply down, while demand has remained the same. So it's basic economics. I mean, this is not rocket science, right?
Exactly.
You may have seen this story. So San Francisco, the new mayor out there, David Lurie, who is doing some really interesting stuff. I think I've been really interested to follow his kind of the things that he's been focusing on. But he, San Francisco has been known for having these distribution programs for clean needles, right? And in my view, has really enabled, a lot of the continued drug use that we're seeing in the Bay Area. So city-funded public health programs, this is the new policy now, according to the mayor, will no longer distribute drug use supplies without providing counseling sessions or connecting recipients to services. So this is where it gets really interesting. They're not even ending the programs. They're simply tying some strings to these programs. And there are activists in San Francisco that are freaking out that this is the most harmful policy imaginable. And it's just amazing to me that even in a place like San Francisco, where they're trying to make a tiny step in the right direction, you're seeing the backlash that they're seeing from their activists. It's pretty incredible. So,
well, and that's the part that's interesting. It said if tracking transparency and availability, if there's an issue with that by these special interests, nonprofit groups, we need to make sure why do they have an issue with that. And I come from a family that has had a lot of substance abuse and drug abuse. I can tell them this right now: they are enabling. The only thing that saved members of my family's life is that they overdosed and they ended up in the hospital. And then they couldn't leave the hospital for months because of how bad it was and how they almost died. That letting people do drugs on the street and to live in their own feces and they're living in a tent on the side of the road is not compassionate. Yeah. And we've got to call these groups out that just are like, no, let's give them more needles. No, let's let them do more drugs on the street. Yeah. Let's not have heavier enforcement, because we have 50% of the nation's homelessness in this state. And it is increasing more and more. And I just don't get it that having standards again is an issue. Yeah. That raising that bar is something that they've had an issue with, and they've done their best job at lowering it. And now finally San Francisco and the people of San Francisco, I tell you this, they're not Republicans, are having an issue with it. That even that county was one of the first counties to pass mandatory drug testing for if you're going to use some of the city services and county 100%. Services. And now I applaud this mayor.
That was huge.
For finally stepping up and pushing back against that crazy ideology.
I mean, he's just trying to move the needle slightly. I think one of the most Orwellian terms that I have heard, and that's saying a lot in this kind of policy space, in the policy arena, is these programs being labeled as harm reduction. If anything, they are harm enabling. They are enabling someone to stay in the state that they are in. And I think that you're 100% right. That is not compassionate. And I think that's what some of these big these new mayors are getting elected and really bringing this message. Obviously, who's the mayor we're just talking about? David Lurie, obviously in San Francisco. But then you've got Matt Mahan in San Jose that is really trying to push back against that narrative. And then, there's a big mayor's race in Oakland where you have someone like...
That might be for other reasons, though.
Yeah. And you have someone like Barbara Lee. The San Francisco Chronicle just came out and endorsed her opponent in that race, saying that she's an icon. But she doesn't have the solutions because her opponent is actually talking about change, making changes. And that's what is going to be required to get these big cities back on track, is going to be leadership, right?
Well, and that's in 2023 alone, 112,000 Americans died from overdose and fentanyl use. That is more people going all the way back, add up all the wars to Vietnam, and we have lost more people in 2023 alone. Is it finally time to say and demand that we need to do better? Because how is that compassionate? And I hate that argument that a lot of the colleagues on the other side, they weaponize compassion. And they say, you don't care. And this is harm reduction policy.
You're criminalizing this activity or something.
And, and it's just, I really call out their policies. I say they policy like the cool parent in high school. They know that their kids are going to go to the party, and they know that their kids are going to go drink with their buddies, and they want to be the cool parent. So we'll allow them to go out, and then there's a DUI and there's an accident. And they just killed the rest of the kids there. That is what a lot of the state's leadership and those in power today, they policy like the cool parent, and it is killing Californians. And we've got to do something better to just have standards. We shouldn't be everybody's friend. We should get out of the way when it comes to government, and we should empower a lot of the locals to actually take on the issues of their community.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to look at it. I like that analogy. And to your point about parents, by the way, we're also losing high school kids to fentanyl. And just in terms of California alone, over 110 people per week are dying of fentanyl overdoses in California. It's absolutely tragic what we're allowing to happen. And so, really glad to see some of these big, mayors, big city mayors, step up and actually be leaders in their left-leaning communities. These are, again, to your point, these are not conservatives that are doing this. These are people that are simply responding to the needs of their community. Regardless of party, this is what their community is saying. And I think it's good that is happening. Really important move there that's going on. We're running out of time, so I'm going to cut a lot of these stories out, but I can't leave without mentioning the big hearing last Tuesday on girls' sports. Were you in the room for that?
I was.
You were in the room. Okay. The room was packed, by the way. I mean, what was your count? I mean, I would say like hundreds of people were there. I would think just in terms of the lines around the door, outside the door, student athletes, community members, parents, there to support two pieces of legislation to protect girls' sports. The first piece of legislation obviously was dealing with actual high school competition, which is something you're probably very familiar with, ensuring that women's sports remain limited to biological women. But then the other piece of legislation got, I think, at another big issue, which is the sports, but also the facilities, the locker rooms, limiting sex-segregated sports and facilities to sex rather than gender identity, which, by the way, is how it was just over a decade ago when California changed it. And so,
you mean generally in the history of the world?
Also that, but yeah. So you were in the room. I have my thoughts on it, obviously, but just briefly, so I can get you out of here. What was your kind of take just being in the room there?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually pretty interesting. I had my 6'5", 17-year-old younger brother. He actually also got up and made that statement too. I mean, Heather Hadwick had her son, who's 6'9" and 16 years old. And I think it's just, this is not even a conversation that we would have had 6 years ago. Yeah. This is not a conversation we were having really 10 years ago. It's not even in the realm of possibility 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was listening to something this morning that said, look, we can actually solve this by just making it to where anybody in that transition side just has to play in boys' sports. That they can have access to all boys' sports and nobody will complain about it. Because when they enter into the girl spaces, that's the part where Title IX, there's a reason why this really came, and it's to protect girl spaces and to give them the ability to have a level playing field amongst those of the same sex and to make sure that that opportunity is there. And so I thought that was super interesting when I was listening to it this morning, is that if anybody who makes it, let them all play in the boys' sports and it should be fine.
Yeah, it was really interesting. A lot of times, you and I both do this where we listen to the opposition arguments because I really do want to understand, to your point about listening to liberal podcasts or whatever it might be, I want to understand where the other side is coming from. And I tuned into this hearing because I really wanted to try to understand what possibly could be the arguments against this. And, I'm not going to go through them all because we're running out of time here. But one of them, to your point, was, well, sports are just inherently unfair. So, we don't need these bills because, the reality is sports are just unfair. That really begs the question. If that's the case, why do we even have sex-segregated sports in the first place? I remember watching Serena Williams, talk about on a talk show many years ago about how fundamentally different men's tennis and women's tennis is. It's not even the same game. It is a different game. And the talk show host, I forget what show she was on. It was some one of the late night shows or something. And they're like, oh, come on, you would be able to keep up with Andy Murray or whatever. And she's like, I would lose 6-0, 6-0. Okay. This isn't even a question. And he was kind of trying to give her credit. And she's like, trust me, it's a different game.
So there's a funny one that you need to look up. And it was the UConn women's coach, I believe. And there was this argument going around, would Brittany Griner beat DeMarcus Cousins?
Oh, wow.
And she was like, oh, I'd beat him every single time one-on-one. And at the end of the clip, after they asked this, he goes, I will put my house, I'll sell everything I own, I will, put it all out there, and I would bet everything that DeMarcus Cousins wouldn't lose. And he is the most winningest women's basketball coach in history. Yeah. And he was like, I'd sell everything and I'd bet the house that DeMarcus Cousins would win.
Yeah, it's just we just have to have common sense, right? And so the other part that I have to mention that I was just really disappointed by was one of our colleagues shared that essentially the existence of these bills, the existence of this hearing, demonstrates that we are headed down the road to Nazi Germany in the 1930s. I thought that was so out of bounds. Just this idea that we're even having this conversation means that I think we really need to bring it home, back to a little bit more reasonable discourse. And that's why it is sad to see, my colleagues leaving X and leaving the discourse, because I do want people to be conversing, but we need to figure out how to do it in a better way. So
And that's the part saying protecting girls' sports is equivalent to the genocidal killing of 6 million individuals is now what we're trying to say is on par.
No, that's totally over the line.
People see that and they're like, yeah, California
totally
is crazy.
inappropriate. 100%. So last thing, we are out of time. I'm going to play this clip to you. I want to get your thoughts on it because it's such an important thing in your district, and then we'll let you go.
You mentioned the high-speed rail. I'm sure you're tired of talking about the high-speed rail, but it was passed in 2000. In 2019, you said, let's be real, the current project as planned would cost too much, respectfully take too long. Right now, there simply isn't a path to get from Sacramento to San Diego. Well, there's a path. It's the highway. Let alone from San Francisco to L.A. I wish there were. However, we do have the capacity to complete a high-speed rail link from Merced to Bakersfield.
Yeah.
I know you're the governor of everyone in the state, and those are... can you name 3 people who ever wanted to go from Merced to Bakersfield? I mean, I feel like... I'm just saying, it's like...
Let me challenge the premise, because I think in many respects this goes to, I think, the state of the Democratic Party. And I mean this with respect. The Central Valley in California is one of the fastest growing parts of the state. It's predominantly rural, yes. It's predominantly Republican, yes. But it's an incredibly important part of the state. And I think we at our own peril, we talk down to people in the Central Valley. And I think a lot of people extend that as part of the problem with the Democratic brand. We talk down to people, we talk past people. I think it's an incredibly important part of the state, not just because I represent the state. By the way, that part of the state, probably the largest share of my recall vote. So I'm not saying that in the context of a political frame, but I am saying it in the context of trying to meet people where they are and respect people. All of us want to be protected. We want to be respected. We want to be connected. And I think they have a right to have this kind of investment as much as the coast.
I really wasn't attacking those people, but good turn.
But I think it's a...
No.
But,
That's why I think it's why you'd be a good candidate. You played this game well.
So, I'll give him, first of all, I actually... don't fully disagree with his analysis of his party. That being said, he obviously didn't answer the question either. Putting aside the Central Valley hate, Merced to Bakersfield, those are fine areas. I do agree we probably shouldn't have started the high-speed rail there, but those are obviously fine areas. But give me your little take on that before we let you go.
It's the easiest thing. $15.7 billion spent on concrete and rebar. And is that good enough? And the state is the one who has control of that project. To me, what I don't want is to be left with a modern-day Stonehenge, because there's nothing else but the government that is going to have to own that project. And the governor stated, he was a lieutenant governor before he was the governor, and yet now we have this failure of what high-speed rail, and it's going to display to the rest of the nation why California is a no-go. We can't do it. We can't even build our own projects. And yet we are going to have high-speed rail in the state of California. It's just not going to be that one. It's going to be the Vegas to Rancho Cucamonga side of things that is being built 100% private. And it's also protected because of interstate commerce, because it crosses from Nevada to California. And this, again, is just going to display. Look, and the governor, again, didn't even answer the question. He actually knows the data when it comes to where the highest portion of the recall was. He knows that it's a very Republican area. That wasn't even part of the question. So that he actually cares about that, and they're just using high-speed rail to say that they're doing something in the valley, where I could just tell you this right now, under this current direction, I just fear we are going to be left with the modern-day Stonehenge, and it's going to be, where do we ask Californians today? When do we raise the standard again to get out of our own way?
Yeah, and to be fair to the governor, he did inherit this project, right? And he was actually a little bit critical of it early on in his term, and then is now, I guess, changed course and has been funding it most of the steps of the way. But this is, not only are they not going to get the billions of dollars that they need to complete the current part of the project, but the idea that you would. Part of funding a project too is getting ridership and then funding the rest of it. There's not going to be the ridership there that's necessary to do that. And so in every way, shape, and form, I think, it's now kind of a sunk cost because they've already got, infrastructure up. But I think this is headed for the failure of, the largest proportions in California. And I think the governor knows that. I think he's trying to get out. He's going to be out of office when it fully collapses, and so it's not going to be his problem anymore. But there's a reason why he's avoiding the question. Let's just put it that way.
There's this joke that I make quite often in between, because there's a stop in Fresno and Madera, which is only about 30-ish miles away from each other. Not really. That you almost have to travel at terminal velocity to get to high speed to make it from Fresno to Madera within that time frame. And none of the project makes sense. And the original project actually was along the I-5 corridor, and it was there because it didn't have the population densities that it had right now, that we should have just created express byways to get to these densities. It's the same thing that happened in France when they built theirs out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of people complained that nobody would ride it because it's out in the middle of nowhere. Well, then cities popped up where they were able to do that. That's what I-5 and that I-5 corridor should have been, not the 99 corridor that's too hard to operate in.
Well, we're going to end on that. I appreciate you coming on, David. If you want to share ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. Listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe on socials and YouTube at Point of Order Pod. And you can follow today's host on X, myself at Joshua_Hoover, and David at ASM Tangipa, correct?
Tangipa, whichever.
Tangipa.
Tang IPA.
IPA.
I do have a campaign beer.
Yeah, that's right. Hey, thank you, David. Appreciate you coming on, and look forward to continuing working with you in the legislature.
Looking forward to it.
See you later.